little obsessed.
Hi there. Today we're going to try using Scale 75's instant colors on top of Zenithal Priming. I wanted to test the instant colors further and see if I could paint quickly but at the same time achieve decent results. I decided to paint a selection of miniatures from Solomon Kane, which is Mythic Games' new Kickstarter game based on the books of Robert E. Howard. I picked 5 unique miniature poses and 11 miniatures overall. This is what they look like unpainted. After removing any mold lines from the minis, it's time to prime them. Priming puts down a nice foundation for your paints and is a critical first step for any miniature painting. To prime them, I use a technique called Zenithal Priming. Zenithal Priming simulates an imaginary light source, bringing out the details on the figure and acts as an aid for the painter in applying lighter colors. In my case, I wanted to use it as an underpainting so that when I applied the instant color paints, the shadows and highlights would be emphasized. To begin with, I painted each of the miniatures using an airbrush and Vallejo's black primer. I should note that you don't have to have an airbrush to use this technique. Spray cans will also work fine. The important thing is to be sure you completely cover the miniature, but use thin coats to do so. You don't want to ruin the detail of the miniatures by getting too much paint on them. Once I applied the first coat of primer and let it dry, I applied a second priming coat. This time I used Vallejo's gray primer to highlight in about a 60-degree cone. The goal of this step is to bring out some of the highlights of the miniature. After letting the gray coat dry, I then use Vallejo's pale sand to apply the third priming coat. This time it's from directly above or maybe a 10-degree arc from the top. This is a personal taste. I don't show it in this video, but after priming, I then use my brush to apply Games Workshop's Nuln oil in the deepest recesses of the miniatures, emphasizing their shadows, followed by pale sand to strengthen their highlights. For a great and more in-depth tutorial on this technique, I recommend Dana Howell's video called How to Underpaint Miniatures. I put a link in the description section of this video. On to the fun part, painting the miniatures. I started with the skin on the models first. Instant Colors includes a color for it, aptly named human flesh. I found it's best to start with lighter colors first, because the darker colors hide mistakes you make from previous shades. But if you're careful, it really doesn't matter the order you paint in. Also, if you do make a mistake, just clean your brush, wet it, and then gently remove the paint wherever you don't want it. Since the male and female villagers only have one pose each, and there are 4 of each of them, I wanted to paint them with some variation. I chose different hair and clothing colors for each of the figures so they look more interesting on the table when finished. For the skeletons, I used Phoenix Egg to paint the bones. I like to work from figure to figure, applying a coat of paint on one while the previous coat dries on another. The wood planks on the base of the skeletons were painted using Endurance Brown. I then moved on to painting the dresses, and I used Acid Green, Love Affair, Replenish Blue, and Full Healing Sin, which are a bright green, red, blue, and yellow, respectively. One thing I learned about instant colors is that when they dry, the color's more intense than when it's wet. That being said, some colors still need 2 and sometimes 3 coats depending on the intensity you're looking for. You can see that when the instant colors are applied to the underpainting, it really gives a smooth blend from the shadows up to the highlights. After about 4 hours, I had applied a base coat on all 11 miniatures. That may seem like a long time, but remember, With the underpainting applied first, that meant that all of the highlighting and shading steps were done as well. All that was left to paint were the details such as the eyes, buckles, belts, etc. For these I used regular scale color paints and not the instant colors. Also, I used Scale 75's metallic colors for any metal items. For the eyes, I use a little cheap method where I paint the whites of the eyes and then I use a multi-liner pen for the pupils. I find this much easier than trying to paint them in. You can get them online and at many craft stores like Michael's here in North America. They come in multiple colors and with tips as fine as 0.03 millimeters. It's much easier than trying to paint them in yourself. The final step is to paint the bases. The skeleton bases were already done as they were planks of wood that were painted earlier. The other miniatures, though, had terrain that needed to be painted. For the villagers, I first painted the ground with Endurance Brown, and then I put a layer of zucchini skin over it. Finally, I painted patches of acid green to add some color variation. The rocks were painted first with black shadow, and then I used Endurance Brown and/or zucchini skin to add variation to the rock colors. Once everything was dry, I glued some static grass onto the bases with PVA and used super glue to glue selective grass tufts or flowers. In total, it took about 10 hours over about a week to paint 11 miniatures, which for me is very fast. Here are the results of my efforts. They won't win any painting competitions, but they're more than adequate for my gaming. For anyone who saw my first video on instant colors, you know that I thought they were okay, but not great. After trying them with the underpainting approach, though, I believe instant colors can truly speed up my painting and still yield great results. The next time, though, I may try using Zenithal Priming, but with gray, then pale sand, and then finally white, rather than black, gray, and pale sand. I found that for light colors like human flesh, the black primer was too hard to cover, and I either had to apply multiple coats of human flesh or first go back and paint over it with pale sand. I think a lighter undercoat would improve that. Also, for anyone who didn't watch my Instant Color Impressions video, I've left a link below of an index I created with all the possible color combinations using instant colors and Scale 75 primers. Well, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. It really helps me out. And please do leave comments. I get to everyone who comments and really appreciate feedback, positive and constructive criticism as well. More importantly, if you have ideas that you would like to see me cover in the future, I'm glad to do it. In fact, based on a recent comment that I received on the next episode, I'll be covering Games Workshop contrast paints and comparing them to instant colors. Until then, I hope you get some time for painting yourself, and please share any results that you have. We'll see you next time.